Wonderful. Recording is live. Guys, I have had way too much caffeine this morning, so if I get talking too fast, feel free to just say, "Hey, Chris, slow down." It's been an adventure, and I definitely have had way too much caffeine already this morning. But we're gonna have a lot of fun. We're gonna be talking about response rate, subject lines, and email campaigns. I spend a lot of time, and for those of you that have attended webinars before, I spent a lot of time talking about how to find the people, X-ray searching, LinkedIn Recruiter, Seek Out, you name the platform. I've at least touched it at some point, I'm sure. But I don't spend as much time talking about now that you found the people, how do you engage them? I shared a post a couple weeks ago about finding email information, and that there was a lot of engagement with it, and it got my wheels thinking. I was like, I haven't talked about this in probably a year and a half. I enjoy the side of sourcing so much, of finding people and looking for those needles and haystacks, and finding the purple squirrels and the unicorns. Um, but I think it's an important conversation to have, that we have this conversation of how do we engage them in a meaningful manner? How do we find the people, and then we talk to them and get them interested in the opportunities that we have, and how do we do so with keeping the human in it? I feel like this is a lot of the conversation that's been happening over the last few weeks in particular, but definitely over the last couple months, of the AI wave that has come in, has taken a lot of the human out of being a recruiter or a sourcer. It's all about speed and automation, and this is one way that we can, even with automation, put the human back into the process, be able to engage people in meaningful ways. And so I'm going to share some data. I'm going to share a lot of things, but we're going to get started with our agenda just so that we can cover what that looks like. Um, we're going to start with subject lines. We're going to look at some open rates versus response rates. We're going to talk a little bit about why that's there's a distinction between the two. We're going to bring that full circle down at the bottom with metrics that matter, and close that loop, and end the conversation around open rates and response rates, and what that looks like. And in between, we're going to talk about the messaging content. I anticipate that our webinar today is probably going to go about 40 to 45 minutes. We'll have time for questions at the end. And again, here's our reminder that all of this is recorded, and it will be sent out. So um, this is where we're going to start. We've got a handful of memes today, so hopefully you find a smile on your face with at least one of these. I try to pull memes from some of my favorite shows and favorite references, and I love memes. So here we go. Let's have some fun. So subject lines. This is my experience. I'm not saying that this is the only right way. This is the only two ways to do these things, but this is the testing that I've been doing over about the last year and a half or so, as I've played around with some different subject lines. Um, I've really had kind of two major approaches, and we've got a couple iterations here. So the first is that I've used in the subject line their current or most recent employer. The example here is that I am a senior talent sourcer at BECU. So if I were receiving an email from me, it would include BECU in the subject line. I've used a couple different iterations here. Those being experience at employer, right? So again, the example of me being employed at BECU, if I were to receive a message, the subject line would read experience at BECU. And then the other iteration I used was how are things, or how were things, depending if they are currently employed, uh, previously employed, or if the applicable experience that I was looking for is it a past employer. I'll look at how were things at BECU, how were things at company XYZ. I can't say X anymore because Elon decided to change Twitter. So I can't say company X because that's a real company. But how are things at company Z? How are company things at company A? Right, and having that conversation, and driving it that direction. The other approach that I've taken is this no sugarcoating. And I try to be as open, transparent as I can. And so I'll say, hey, I have a senior talent sourcer opportunity at BECU, right? For example, or I have a principal software developer. I've got a sales executive at, and whatever company you are employed at, right? That you're doing the work for your client. right? So those are kind of the two approaches that I've taken, and I've seen some really interesting results that I think are meaningful, and the reason why I want to even talk about this. Um, Here's the results. And we're going to spend some time here. There's a lot of data, and we're going to have conversations around this. What I didn't include on this slide, and in hindsight, I probably should have, is sample size. So I'm talking about how many people I messaged. We're looking at over the last 18 months. We're looking somewhere ballpark about 4,500 people. So I've got a sample size of 4,500 people that have been messaged using some of these approaches. And this is what I'm consistently seeing. Please note that all of these rates are averages. So we're going to see what these averages were. I had some that scored way higher. I had some that scored way lower. The law of averages is finding what does that come out to. So the first distinction is open rates. If you're using a messaging drip campaign software such as Sourcewell or Gem, I utilize Seekout right now. Um, if you're using some kind of a drip campaign, those softwares are tracking open rates for you. Anytime someone clicks that email, and even if they read it, they don't respond, it's gonna track that as an open. Um, this is one of your first metrics to make sure that your deliverability is good. So for those of you that were able to talk or attend the RecruitCon hosted by Hire Easy a couple weeks ago or last week, um, Brian Fink talked a lot about this. He had done some email subject line testing, with a batch of 200 people, and was talking about deliverability, making sure that he was sending from his personal email address as opposed to his work email address. Wanted to test the deliverability of different subject lines. Your open rate is what's going to be an indicator, one indicator of deliverability. Is are people clicking on this? Is it landing in their inbox? And is it visible? So the first, here are my four different subject lines. I feel a little bit like I'm in a science fair project from grade school. But uh, subject line number one was just the employer. We're going to go back to that example of me being at BECU. If I were receiving my own email, the subject line would just read BECU. That's it. No emoji, no additional text, just whatever their company name is. And I was seeing a consistent, about 73% open rate. I had a couple campaigns that scored really, really high and were just above that 80 mark. And I had a couple that were a little lower too. But for the most part, things were landing pretty consistently at about that low 70s range. And we ended up with an average of 73% open rate, which is pretty good. If I'm sending a couple thousand emails and 73% of them are being opened, I must be doing something directionally correct. The next one was experience at employer. So I worked for a credit union. This one in particular, I was looking at those that were employed at or previously employed by other banks or credit unions. And so I tried really hard to make sure that I was targeting that. I sent a batch out for those that were just currently employed at a different bank or credit union, and those that were a different batch that was things at a previous employer that was a bank or credit union. And I noticed my open rates dropped off fairly dramatically. I was, and these are, to be fair, smaller sample sizes. I could keep testing with this. But in total, these were still a couple hundred people that were being messaged with this strategy. And I noticed a 44% open rate. I said, well, that's not great. I don't really want to see that. 43% open rate compared to the 73% open rate certainly indicated that there was at least less interest in those. Um, don't know what the reasoning for is. It could just be that it was too salesy, was getting caught in spam filters. I'm not positive, but those were what my open rates were. Um, so something interesting to keep in mind. And then, the tactic that I've been testing most recently is role opportunity at my employer. Again, this is that. I want to be transparent. I'm going to send you an email and I'm going to say, hey, I've got a systems developer, a systems engineer opportunity at BECU. And I landed with an aggregate 69% average open rate on that one. This one has got about 1,000 people, a little over 1,000 people right now that have been tested with this particular uh, subject line. Um, so that's what we're looking at open rate wise. Now that doesn't translate to response rates, because you're going to see with just the employer, I had a 44% response rate. So by far, if it was just the employer, I had the highest open rate and the highest response rate. If I was looking at subject line number 2 and subject line number 3, um, incidentally, they were very similar: 27% response rate, 28% response rate. And I think the response rates are less connected to what the subject line is. Yeah, and I think it's more of to what the meat of the contents are. And I'll show what that looks like. But with fewer people opening the email, I'm having fewer people reply from my total sample size. So we're going to see a drop in those that are responding. Um, and then role, my role at the opportunity, the 69% open rate, we're sitting at about an aggregate 37% response rate. So again, keep in mind, this is for bulk email campaigning. If I'm looking at some small targeted groups of 15, 20 people, I'm going to write some highly customized, personalized messages that I would hope are scoring a lot higher than 37% response rate. I'd want to see closer to about that 70, 80% response rate, because I'm tailoring each individual message to that person. This is, I've identified 150, 200 people for a role that meet my general qualifications. I'm going to send them a message, try and set up some phone screens, figure out, are you interested? Are we aligned? In compensation needs, and what we're going to talk about what those look like. But this is kind of the initial data that I've collected over over a year and a half of testing some different subject lines and tracking response rates. We just had a big conversation around this internally as I was working with my team and figuring out what our response rates are. Are we directionally correct? Are we doing what we're supposed to? And so I was revisiting a lot of this data just recently and was like, oh man, there's a story to tell here. So we're going to keep going. So we're going to talk about the message content and why I think even with some of the smaller open rates, we were still seeing decent response rates. I've got kind of two different strategies that I've employed over the last couple of years of my career. I spent a couple years working at Wayne Technologies, where we leveraged the DISC personality assessment as our guiding star for messaging contents. The DISC personality, if you're not familiar with, everybody will fall within one of four categories. And so we would craft one message in a 4-stage email campaign directed at each personality type. This is a way that you can be very outwardly inclusive in a way that everybody has a personality. Everyone's going to be different. Everyone's going to be unique, but we're all going to have tendencies or similarities that fall within one of these categories. So when I was utilizing this structure, and I used this well into late into last year, as had been my staple, I was consistently hitting at about 30 to 35% response rates, and I was like, I wonder if I can do better. So I started A/B testing, and under some direction from my incredible manager, Marvin Smith, we decided to pivot the direction we were going with our messaging and start focusing more on what's in it for you, rather than saying, hey, I think you're going to like this opportunity, this is what we're about, this is what we're doing, this is why we're hiring, and siloing those messages into different personality types. We started focusing each message in a very targeted, here's a specific aspect that we think is important to you. This is why you would want this opportunity. And so we were trying to get candidate buy-in before we had ever even talked to them, and we started to see some success with this. I iterated a couple times. I have collaborated with Marvin on this, and it's evolved into what I currently use. But if you haven't heard the acronym WIFM, what's in it for me, I want you to start thinking about that, because this is the candidate experience. In a world of instant gratification and always trying to come out on top, the what's in it for me is the selling point. That's what you need to do. That's what you need to communicate, kind of deal. Um, and I'm going to put my caveat in here. This isn't the only way to do things. This isn't the only correct way to do things. There are lots of different different approaches. Would this disc model still work? Absolutely. Is the what's in it for me model going to work? Absolutely. Are there other ways that you can approach this? Definitely. Um, these are just the couple that I've leveraged. So here's some more A/B testing that we did. I was looking at response rates for the DISC personality assessment was hitting consistently low 30s. Iterated, came in, with the what's in it for me, and we started hitting high 30s into the low 40s. We even into the high 40s, and I had a couple campaigns that were five, yeah, or 200 people, and we were looking at response rates of 50+% of people that were being messaged were responding, and a lot of it was transparency and gaining that buy-in. So here's an example. This is a real message that I sent for a software engineering manager. Um, I utilize some, I guess, unorthodox approaches. The first thing that you're going to notice is this is a huge email. There's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of information, and we're always told, at least I have always been told, keep things short, keep it simple. You need to be able to get their buy-in really quickly. Well, I did that in that first paragraph. This is where I want the absolute buy-in. And I'm using some of the auto filters, right? Generating their first name, generating the day of the week, right? That you're going to see in these different messaging platforms. But that very first paragraph or first block of text is instantly where I'm grabbing the attention. I'm getting the buy-in. Straight to the point. At BECU, we're looking for a senior software engineering manager. Not sure what your current compensation is. I'm not going to ask what your current compensation is, but I don't want to assume either, right? So, not sure what your current compensation is, but we're looking at a base salary of 164 to 200,000 with a 15% performance-based bonus. Right out the gate, I'm telling you what our budget target pay is, um, what the bonus structure looks like, right? If I were at an employer that had stock options, if I had equity, this is where I would include that. This is going to be the thing of, if you meet that basic qualification for them to even consider something else, you've already got some buy-in. They're going to start reading the rest. Next, I'm going to give you a role overview. This is not super customized. It's customized per role so that I'm adequately sharing the information, but this is at a high level. This is what my hiring manager has communicated. This is what my talent team is looking at. This is what we're advertising for. This section here is not changing. I want to give you that really high level overview, have a conversation so that you can understand what's going on. Why am I hiring? What am I looking for? So I've got their initial buy-in with the compensation range. I've given them an overview of the role, and then I say, hey, why this role might be interested to you, right? And I've got three bullets here. Work-life balance, stability and reputation, mentorship and collaboration. And these weren't picked by accident. At BECU, we're remote first, so I tend to lead with that work-life balance anyway. This is going to be a harder one to pitch if you have a full-time in-office team, or even a hybrid 2-3 days a week in office. This one might be a harder pitch, but what selling points do you have that somebody might be interested in? This is a huge thing. We've done a ton of studying with the talent audience, right? What does our audience look like? The 2024 digital worker survey from McKinsey indicated that work-life balance was one of the biggest things that job seekers in the market are looking for. So I wanted to talk about that. In a world where we've had a lot of instability, we've seen a lot of layoffs over the last couple of years. I recruit primarily in software engineering. I want to highlight that, hey, we have stability and reputation here. Like, we're not going to go anywhere. I know that's a concern. I'm still talking to people that are like, hey, we're pending some layoffs here. I've survived 2-3 cuts, but I don't know if I'm going to make the next one. So I'm trying to get the sell in, and then the mentorship and collaboration for this particular role. I'm going to move slides here to highlight some of these things. The mentorship and collaboration piece. When I was looking, when I'm working with my hiring team, the big question here, or big selling point that they're looking for is somebody that thrives in that people management. They've been in the tech space, but they really want to be a people manager. They really want to help people succeed and build up a team. And so that's going to be the big selling point. As I was looking through profiles, identifying those that were going to be interested in the opportunity, um, These were the things that I was looking for, reading resumes and LinkedIn profiles. Are they talking about mentoring? Are they talking about coaching? Are they talking about wanting to build successful teams? So I'm gonna sell that, right? Think back to that. What's in it for me? This is where that exists. And this is a meaty email. This is huge. And I understand that. And it can feel very overwhelming to get an absolute wall of text. Um, what I want to share with you all is that this message of my 4 or 5 step email campaign, this message has my highest response rate out of each individual message, right? When I'm talking about response rates, 2 slides ago, back here, we're talking about over the entire campaign. I sent 5 messages to 200 people and I had a 37% response rate. I can pretty accurately predict where my response rate is going to land based off of this one message. The rest of it is to try and hopefully get your attention. Maybe I just missed you on that day, but this is where I spend a lot of time crafting what it is I'm building, what it is I'm selling, and the conversation we're having. Um, this message regularly, this one alone regularly lands me between 23 and 26% response rate of just this. And this is part of a 4 or 5 step email campaign. So this is what we're looking at. I'm going to pause there for a minute. Does anyone have any questions? Because I just unloaded a whole bunch of information. All right, let's keep going then. Let's have some fun. Okay, the next piece here. How do I craft these messages? Right, I've got my first one. I've built that. That is a well-oiled machine, and it's successful. How do I build the rest? Right. I leverage AI, generative AI, right? This is the selling point. This is the automation piece that I can still use and then build in my human touch to it. So pick your poison. Whether you're using Chat GPT, Copilot, Gemini, whatever other one is out there that you want to leverage. And what you're going to do is this. You're going to go in with a prompt. Really, really simple prompt. What are 10 reasons that a qualified individual would be interested in this job opportunity? Then paste your job ad. Okay. Uh, it's that simple. You do that a couple times, and if you don't like the 10, say, hey, what are 5 more reasons? Hey, what are 6 more reasons? Right. But get a list of reasons that a qualified individual would be interested in the opportunity that you have. Because now I can be a person. I can say, hey, this is why you might still be interested in this opportunity. An example of what this looks like. Another example, I was recently working on a role where they wanted a heavy emphasis on diverse candidates. The team itself is lacking diversity. They want a cultural addition to their team to be able to give unique perspectives and conversations. Two, so as I was building out this search and I was figuring out who my qualified individuals were, um, I had my list, generally fit what we were looking for, and I submitted my prompt, and I said, hey, what are 10 reasons that a qualified individual would be interested in this job opportunity? Also, we're targeting those that would fall under diverse categories, right? um, and it spit out a whole bunch of different reasons. I pulled a couple of those and I said, hey, this is really good base. Let's work with this. And so I highlighted some of our DEI initiatives. Some of the things that we're working on to build equity and inclusion at the management director level and above. Since I'm targeting those that are going to fall within diverse categories, I want to make sure that we highlight that that's an important thing for BECU. Another thing that, another example is I pasted my job ad and I said, hey, what are 10 reasons that somebody would be interested in this principal developer role that I was working on this about 4 or 5 months ago. And in the job ad, it had highlighted that they were working on some core infrastructure, and so some of the real meaty back end work that engineers are going to do to the core banking system. Um, Chat GPT was like, well, hey, they're going to be working on services that impact 1.3 million members on an everyday basis. so the scope and impact of their work is going to be immediately felt. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. At the principal level, they're wanting interesting work. They want to see what that scope is. It's less of give me my code and I'm going to crank it out. It's how do I elevate myself now and look at things big picture wise. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? So this is where I started spending some of my time to help build what the next steps are going to look like. And the subsequent emails after that first one are a whole lot shorter. Um, a whole lot shorter. So we've got that going on. Um, but yeah, that's how I approach the next steps. Holly, that's a great question. Do I have a preference for one AI tool over another? Any that have worked better than others? I honestly have found my best success with Chat GPT. I think that's simply because I've used it the most, and so I've learned some of the nuances and ways to word things. I also really like Copilot, but I use that more for image generation um, than I do text generation. I don't use Google Gemini at all. I wanted to make sure that it was there in case other people use it. Okay. Um, so that's what that looks like. I do want to pull up. I thought I had it in my slide here. So I'm going to pull this up really quickly so that I can show you. And I apologize. I thought I had. This is my last email. Um, okay, wonderful. So I'm going to pull this over so that y'all can see. This is a real email I sent a week ago, a little over a week ago. So once I've done, the 2 or 3 additional messages that are targeted at what's in it for me. The last email that I have is what I was taught and coached on as a breakup email. Right? I've now sent you 3 or 4 emails. No, you haven't responded yet. That's fine. You're still in the drip campaign. So I'm going to drop you one of these, right? And so I'm going to pull this over. This should show just fine. Okay. And we are going to pop this out. Right. So we've got an example here. You can see a whole bunch, right? I had a whole campaign running, right? But a couple things. This is my real email that was sent. This will be my last email for now. And I'm going to assume that you've read them. Even if my software knows and I know that you haven't opened a single email, I'm going to leave this here very politely. I'm going to make sure that they know that if they want to reach out, they can. You know, um, the offer above applies to all roles at BECU, not just the senior manager role that I had emailed them about. And then I let them know, hey, there's no more emails coming. This is the last one. And this is why it's the breakup email. I'm saying, hey, we're done. I'm not going to send you anything else. And then I put them in my own CRM and I'm like, hey, don't follow up with this person for at least 6 months. Give them 6 months to ruminate. Maybe they'll be back on the market. If I see anything, updates on LinkedIn, whatnot, maybe I'll reach out earlier. But I'm going to pull them out of my cycle of people that I'm messaging for at least 6 months. Right. In the meantime, wish you all the best wherever your career takes you. Real polite. I'm trying to be human. I'm trying to say, hey, it's okay. Timing wasn't right now. We're fine. No sweat. The other thing that I want to highlight, so you can see right here, we're going to open up my inbox and surprise you guys, we're in my actual professional inbox, right? The other things you can see, right here's that same email we highlighted. This is the real email that I send. Where I'm not putting something together for the presentation. DEI efforts. This was something in particular that we're working on for this role. Would love to hear about your experiences with Northrop Grumman. Right. Again, this is an autofill. Create some personality. This was their current employer. My next one is I wanted to highlight scope and impact and what our investments are in you. And these are all responses I was getting from Chat GPT. I was saying, hey, what are reasons that somebody would be interested in this job? And it spit things out, and I'm like, okay, this makes sense. I want to focus on this one. And then my breakup email. This was a simple 4-step campaign, and this one has been one of my best performing campaigns ever. I'm sitting at like a 55% response rate for 200 people messaged. Um, so we're doing well. I have been very busy talking to people there, but that's what that looks like. The other thing I want to talk about is cadence. When I'm sending these drip campaigns, I send them about every other business day. And the reason for that is, I don't want to be too spammy. I don't want to send them, 2 3 messages a day. I don't want to be emailing them every day. I want to be respectful, but still persistent enough that, if they check their email at all in a week and a half, 2 week period, they're going to see, 4 or 5 emails from me. Okay. All that being said, we're going to go to story time here. We're sitting at about 32 minutes. We've got a little bit of a story time, so start thinking of whatever questions you might have, because we're going to be wrapping up here in just a few minutes. Metrics that matter. So you probably remember the slide. We're talking about, our results, response rates, what's going on. And so I want to talk about, 1 versus 4, right? The employer with the 73% percent open rate, and the role opportunity at BECU with a 69% response rate. And then the difference between or open rates versus the response rates, right? 44-37. So a data analyst, data driven person is going to tell you, we'll go with the employer. You're seeing higher open rates and higher response rates, right? However, my responses weren't always directionally correct with those ones. I was getting people messaging me back, and they're like, "Hey, I already work here. Why are you messaging me about this opportunity?" And it would be super clear. You saw what the text there said. I've got an opportunity at BECU that I would love to pitch you. I've got a conversation here at BECU. This is what the role looks like. Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about it. But I was still getting responses that were like, "Hey, I already work here." And so while that was driving my metric up, they were opening the response, the email, they were responding. It was a bad candidate experience. They were like, "Hey, this was confusing. I didn't appreciate this." A lot of the times, it would still turn into at least a conversation, but it was a metric driving influencer that wasn't actually getting me closer to what I was doing. And I've learned that with this option number 4, being as transparent as I can, is consistently getting me that better candidate experience. They know why I'm messaging. They know who the employer is. They see what the pay rate is. Everything is laid out. And all that changed was that subject line. And so even though my response rate dropped, the responses have been higher quality of responses. They're very quick, even if they're not interested. They're like, "Hey, thank you so much for being transparent and sharing the pay range. Thank you for sharing the details here. I'm not looking at this time, but if I know of anybody, I'll let them know." Okay, so this is this is such an important part of understanding what metrics matter, right? Just because you have a high response rate, just because you have a high open rate, is that translating to what you need? I've I've experienced some text campaigns, both as a recipient and as a sender. I've messaged people on their phone. I've emailed them 4 or 5 times, didn't get a response. I sent them a text message with the contact info finding that I've had, and I'm like, "Hey, tried emailing you here. Didn't hear back, but would love to chat with you about the opportunity I emailed you about. Here's a link to the email," or something along those lines. And those ones, I get wildly high response rates, but it's all telling me to leave them alone. And usually in less polite ways. I've invaded their privacy, right? But now my response rate was really high. My open rate was really high. Um, does that matter? Right? Are we having that conversation? And on the flip side, I remember applying for a job. This was, oh geez, 5 6 years ago. I was living in Utah. I saw an opportunity that looked really good for a company that will remain nameless, and I was like, "Hey, I would, I'd really like to work here." I had some connections that worked at the company. I submitted my application, listed them as referrals. I got rejected, and I was like, "No big deal." It wasn't right. I didn't quite meet the expectations. A year and a half later, I get a text message, and it's like, "Hey, we have a, you know, we have a customer facing role that we'd love to hire you for. We would even consider you as a team lead. Starting pay is like $16 an hour." And I was like, hmm, I don't know that you've done your homework here, because I'm not team lead. I'm not in I'm not in customer facing roles. I'm in recruiting, and I have been for years now at this point. Um, and pays a mismatch, and I also work, 5 buildings down from you. I don't know that this is the right deal. And I ended up having some conversations with them afterwards. Was really polite about it, and they said very similar things. They're like, "Oh yeah, we had people respond like crazy to that text message campaign, but nothing stuck. People were not well receiving of it, and generally not very polite about it." So all of this is to say, make sure that you're tracking the metrics that matter, right? The metrics do matter. Your open rates and your response rates are important. We need to be driving what these look like. We need to be A/B testing, always asking yourself, what can I do better? How can I increase this in a meaningful way? But then take that step back and say, okay, I've now increased my rates. I've increased, open rate, response rate. Um, maybe I'm having more phone screens. Is the quality there? Is the candidate experience a pleasant one? Um, am I getting on target to where I interview a candidate, I submit them, I pass them through to my, my hiring team. Are they sticking? Are they making it to the final round? All of these are going to be your metrics that tell the story of not just how did your campaign perform, but was it in the right space? So that's story time. Um, that being said, here's my connection information. We're going to answer some questions. I saw quite a few. Uh, So, Brett, your campaign, 5 emails, 3 days apart, not sent on the weekends. Perfect. That's exactly what I do. Well, not exactly. Mine's generally 5 emails. The one that I sent was 4. We were in a time crunch. I turned it around real fast, and if I had a fifth message, I would probably still be buried in interviews right now. But yeah, 3 days apart, 2 days apart. My goal is to have them messaged 2 to 3 times a week at most. Um, so if the message goes out on a Monday, they're getting another one on Wednesday, getting another one on Friday. Um, that to me can feel excessive. So the 3 days, go for it if that's what's working for you. Either way, give them some time between emails so that it doesn't feel uh, belligerent. You're not blowing up their inboxes. Um, Amanda, 663 cadence. Can you define what the 663 cadence is? I have never heard that term before. But as I said, my cadence is every other business day. Don't send on weekends. Don't send on holidays, even if it's automated. Um, I was using an automated email drip campaign and sent a message out on Christmas Day. Because I forgot to turn it off and didn't realize that it was going to send on a holiday. I had some very angry responses and people that have made it very clear that they don't want to work for a company that's requiring employees to work on Monday or on not on Monday, on Christmas. I explained to him, I was like, hey, it's an automation software. I loaded it. It's my bad. I'm sorry. So that being said, yeah, try not to email people on the weekends. Unless you are physically emailing them on the weekend yourself and you're already working and you can justify that. Um, Try not to do that. Also, holidays. Don't do it. It's not worth it. Jackie, can you recap the softwares you've used again for these email campaigns? Yes, absolutely. So I've used a couple of them. My favorite by far was Source Whale. I've used their platform a lot. Used it for a couple of years, and saw a lot of tremendous success. I could utilize custom memes, custom GIFs. There was a lot of customizability to the automated system. So I love that a lot. Currently, I'm using Seekout. I'm not crazy over it. I really like the Seekout platform for sourcing. I don't like it as much for the messaging. Um, it's sufficient for my needs at the moment. And currently, we are onboarding GEM, and that's not J, GEM, as a broader CRM platform. Um, and I haven't had the opportunity to use it live for messaging, but having played a little bit with it in the sandbox and seeing what it can do, I'm really excited for it. So those are kind of I'd say the three that I've got at least most recent or most in-depth exposure and experience with. All of them are paid platforms. I'm not sponsored by any of them to give them any particular perks or shout outs. It's just my own real life experience. Holly, Given the recent data breaches for AT&T and T and other providers, do you think text campaigns would be good to continue for the near future, or have you seen challenges in replies here? So I very much try to avoid text campaigns and have done so for the last little while. Um, my personal feel is that there are too many people sending scam texts all the time. I love to go to Reddit, guys. This is my personal life. I love to go to Reddit and go to Reddit slash r slash scam bait. It's hilarious to watch these people mess with the people that are texting, the scammers that are texting. I've received some of those messages myself. My wife has received some of those messages herself from people that are scamming. So I try to avoid texting until I've made a connection with the person and they know who I am. Um, just my personal preference. You do you. Figure out what works, what doesn't work. But that's where I'm at. Uh, Brett, with increasing privacy laws, restrictions around the how one finds contact phone info, along with opt-in rules. The company you work for prefers us not to send text messages. Oh, yep. Until you've engaged with them. Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. I don't like to text them. Even then, I really don't like to text them at all. I don't need my number floating around out there with a million people. I did that for a while, and I was having people message me at ungodly hours of the night because that was when they were up and working on applications and they were stressed about finding a job, and my phone's blown up because they're like, "Hey, we talked, a couple days ago. Any updates?" And they're just sending their messages. After that, I was like, "Yeah, no, we're done. I'm not. I really don't want my number floating around out there." So if you have a texting service as part of your messaging platform, use that. Don't use your personal device, guys. I learned that the hard way. Um, Wonderful. Yes, Timon, the it is recorded. So you can see on the screen, youtube.com/Aquaman_recruiter. Uh, I'll send the slides out next week. But if you go to YouTube, you can see all of my previous webinars. This one will be uploaded there next week, as well as emailed out, so you can find it there. The recording includes my face here in this box. It includes off to the side over here. We've got the slides, and then it'll include the chat. So wonderful. Yes, Brett, I've heard great things about Find 'em. I have not played around with it at all. It's on my to-do list for the next month as I continue to look at some other stuff. Aaron just started using Loxo. I have limited experience with Loxo. I did some contract work for a company in the insurance space that they leverage Loxo for their messaging. Um, I did a little bit in their platform, but I was doing stuff mostly out of platform there. I did like what I was seeing in Loxo. It just didn't integrate with my flow as I was a contractor. Uh, but from what I've seen, I liked it. So hopefully it works out for you. Um, Wonderful. That is it, guys. We're right at 45 minutes. I ballparked us that would be here. Um, Last plug that this is going to be sent out. The recording, the link that goes out with the recording will be valid for about 3 months. Uh, After that, it will not be valid, and it will only be accessible on the YouTube channel. I'm not trying to grow the YouTube channel, guys. It's entirely there just to be a house for all of my webinars. So when you go, you're going to see videos that have one or two, 13 views. Some still have 0 views. That's fine. Don't sweat it. It's real. It's me. It's there. It's entirely free cloud storage on my part. But thank you everybody for coming. We are done. That is it. So I'm going to stop the recording now.